the Science Communication and Dissemination Directorate at CSIR. Many of our viewers who are following the CSIR India social media web pages have attended our earlier science episodes of the webinar series telecast almost every Saturday since 10th of October this year. Last week we had a gap for the festival of Diwali. I hope everyone had a great and safe festivities. For the new viewers, let me inform that this is a series of science talk by the winners of the prestigious Shanti Swarup Bhatnagar Prize for the year 2020. The Shanti Swarup Bhatnagar Award is India's highest award in the field of science and technology. It is given every year by CSIR for notable and outstanding research in the multidisciplinary science areas in India. The award is named after the founder director of Council of Scientific and Industrial Research, Dr. Shanti Swarup Bhatnagar, and was first awarded in the year 1958. In popular culture, it is often known as India's Nobel Prize. This year's Shanti Swarup Bhatnagar Prize winners were announced on 26th September 2020, which happens to be CSIR Foundation Day. Through this webinar series, we are trying to communicate the nature and methods of science carried out by the eminent award-winning scientists to the interested youth and the aspiring researchers, and bridge a gap between the enthusiasts and the experts. The ongoing COVID-19 pandemic has imposed restrictions on social and physical interactions. In a way, we are trying to overcome these restrictions by connecting the science world with our online series. I thank all the Bhatnagar laureates for participating and being with us in the Science Talk. In the series, we have earlier conducted webinars with the winners of the award in biological sciences, physical sciences, chemical sciences, and medical sciences discipline. Today, we have the winners of engineering science discipline with us, Dr. Kinshuk Dasgupta from Bhabha Atomic Research Center and Dr. Amol Kulkarni from CSIR-National Chemical Laboratory. First of all, many congratulations to both of them for winning the prestigious award. I shall have the pleasure of introducing both of them to the viewers and listen to their talks. But before that, we welcome our head madam, Dr. Geetavani Rayasam from Science Communication and Dissemination Directorate, CSIR. Unfortunately, we don't have our DG today as he has to travel to Lucknow for some other engagements. So I request our madam to please deliver the opening remarks. Madam, please.
Thank you, Shika, and welcome everyone to this webinar series on Saturday morning. As Shika said, we've been doing this for various disciplines. The idea behind connecting the science and the scientists with the society, and webinars have been a good communication tool in this COVID-19 when we really cannot reach out to the people in a physical manner as one would have preferred. Again, hearty congratulations to both the winners on behalf of CSIR, to Kinshuk Dasgupta and Amol Kulkarni. And as Shika mentioned, our DG CSIR could not attend because of his busy engagements. Otherwise, he always loves to be in these seminars, and he's been really steering the science communication at CSIR. But he conveys his best wishes to both of you, and on his behalf, I'm happy to convey that. And welcome again to both of you, and we are very happy that you all the laureates have been readily participating in these webinars, and it's been great success, I think. And the idea is some of the excellent science which is in the laboratories should be taken to the people, and I hope that this is one of the exercises, and this will continue in future also with various laureates and various award winners, and we have also done in regional languages. So these are some of our efforts going forward, and I welcome again both of you, Dr. Dasgupta and Dr. Kulkarni, and over to you, Shika. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for your encouraging opening remarks and for promoting science and communication. Before we move towards the speakers and talks of the day, let me inform that this web series is being telecast on CSIR India social media web pages of Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Any questions arising from the talks can be posted on the comment section of the social media pages and will be taken up at the end of both the talks. So let us start with our first speaker, Dr. Kinshuk Dasgupta. I shall have the pleasure of introducing him first to our viewers. Dr. Kinshuk Dasgupta joined Bhabha Atomic Research Center as a scientific officer after completing his bachelor in engineering in the field of metallurgy and material science from Jadavpur University in 1999. He completed his PhD in chemical engineering from the Institute of Chemical Technology, Mumbai. In fact, his PhD was awarded with Ambuja Cement Best PhD Thesis Award. Further, he visited University of Cincinnati, USA as a Fulbright visiting scholar during 2018 and 19, and he has received Young Metallurgist of the Year award by Ministry of Steel, Young Engineers Award, and Scientific and Technical Excellence Award in 2017 by Department of Atomic Energy. He has also been awarded with Dr. N.J. Suchak Innovation Award in 2019 by the Institute of Chemical Technology. So the recently awarded Shanti Swarup Bhatnagar Prize has been conferred upon Dr. Dasgupta for his notable contribution on carbon-based nanomaterials and composites leading to the development of Bhabha Kavach, a lightweight import substitute ballistic resistant jacket for Indian armed forces. He has various patents, authored book chapters, and more than 90 publications in his name. In addition to the Bhabha Kavach technology, he has transferred several technologies to the industries, including large-scale synthesis of carbon nanotubes, rare earth magnetic alloy powder, and he is currently serving as head of the Advanced Carbon Materials Section, Materials Group at Bhabha, and associate professor at Homi Bhabha National Institute, India. So with this, I congratulate once again and welcome Dr. Dasgupta and invite him for his talk, which is on the topic Fascinating World of Carbon Nanomaterials. Dr. Dasgupta, over to you.
Thank you. Good morning to all. And first of all, I would like to thank Dr. Monday, who is not present today, but he is Director General of CSIR. And then I would also like to thank Dr. Gita Vani and Dr. Shikha for their encouraging introductory speeches. So let me first share my screen. I think that is better. I hope everybody is able to hear me.
Yes, we can hear you, Dr. Dasgupta.
It should be audible. You please share the screen, sir.
Is my screen is now shared?
Yeah, it is shared and visible. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. First of all, I feel it is indeed a great honor and pleasure for getting an opportunity to talk in this prestigious forum. And I must thank CSIR for providing the opportunity. As you can see, the title of my talk is Fascinating World of Carbon Nanomaterials. As many school and college students also, they are also listening to this lecture, I have kept the content accordingly. And as the title suggests, I have emphasized on an element that is called carbon, which gives an initial impression of a black substance. But carbon is basically a versatile material. It is a wonderful material with wide range of structures and properties. It can have crystalline as well as non-crystalline structure. Crystalline means when the atoms, they are periodically arranged over a long range of order. Like we have graphite, diamond, carbon nanotube, fullerene, graphene. Out of them, that graphite and diamond, they are naturally occurring. And the others we can manufacture. Some of them also we get in nature. And in non-crystalline structure, that means the atoms are not periodically arranged over a long range, but there may be short range order. And generally we come across amorphous carbon, soot, carbon black, glassy carbon like this. Also, from the point of view of hybridization, the carbon can have sp2 hybridization, can have also the sp3 hybridization, and mix of all. So as you can see, this is a really a wonderful material, and we can play with the structure and properties. So they are tailor-made. You can also find another term which is called nanomaterials in the title. So nano means materials means they should have at least in any of their dimension have size below 100 nanometer. And when we have these wonderful carbon nanomaterials, so I'll be talking about their structures and their applications in structural as well as functional. In this slide, you can see the basic arrangement of carbon atoms. So first is called graphene. So it is a single layer of carbon atoms which are hexagonally arranged, having sp2 hybridized structure. And then if we stack them one above another, we end up with graphitic structure. We call them graphite. Then if we can roll them seamlessly, so we end up with a tubular structure, which is called carbon nanotube. Nanotube means the diameter is in the nanometer dimension, but the length may be micron or even millimeter. So when there is a single tube, we call it single wall carbon nanotube or SWCNT. If there are concentric multiple tube, we call them multi-walled carbon nanotube or MWCNT. Again, we can make a curvature like a football, but with the help of hexagon as well as pentagons. And this is like a football structure, cage structure. This is called fullerene. And if we can put oxygen atoms along with carbon atoms, so we call it oxidation, we end up with graphene oxides. So all these materials, they're wonderful materials. And today I'll be focusing on graphene and carbon nanotubes. And being an engineer, my interest is how we can make this in large scale and apply it for the societal application. Why these two materials are so attractive? So if we compare the properties of different form of carbons with that of steel every day we use, so I have taken steel as a comparison. You can see the strength, Young modulus, they are several times higher in case of nanotubes as well as in case of graphene. So where the steel strength is in the 1 to 2 GPa, that is gigapascal, almost 10 times higher is that of the carbon nanotube, and almost more than 13 times higher for the, you can say this is 60 times higher for the graphene. Similarly, Young modulus also one order higher, and graphene and carbon nanotubes, they have very attractive thermal as well as electrical properties. And due to that, these nanomaterials, they find applications in various fields, like in composites, where carbon nanomaterials, they are used as fillers. We can have metal matrix composite, ceramic matrix composite, or we can have polymer matrix composite. Then in water treatment, gas adsorption, energy storage, here these nanomaterials are used due to their very high specific surface area. Again, we can functionalize these nanomaterials with different ligands and use them in drug delivery. We can use them for sensing application, field emission, and catalysis. At BARC, that is at Bhabha Atomic Research Center, we have focused on several applications for these carbon nanomaterials. In the left-hand topmost left-hand side, here I can show that the carbon nanotubes we have incorporated with boron carbide, which is a very hard ceramic material, to end up with carbon nanotube boron carbide composite, and then with ultra high molecular weight polyethylene composite. And these two composites have been used to make the lightweight ballistic resistant jacket, which is called Bhabha Kavach. I'll come into detail at the last part of my talk. And then also we can dope heteroatoms like boron and nitrogen in carbon structure. That means in the lattice position, we can replace carbon with boron and nitrogen, and we can see how these atoms behave in terms of hydrogen storage. Then we can use carbon nanotube with polymer for metal ion extraction. So we can extract various metal ions like rare earths, like other metal ions from the water to purify water. And then from nuclear waste, we can remove the actinides by using the carbon nanotube into that. Recently, we have started work on graphene oxide and concrete. So you can make concrete more, having more compressive strength, less permeability, and with very good properties, that is graphene oxide that can be used with concrete. And another interesting structure called 3D carbon aerosol. So it is a self-assembled structure of long carbon nanotubes, which can have application in flexible supercapacitor, in piezoelectric sensor, and biosensor, and chemical sensor. But for all these applications, one thing we must remember that we need to prepare these nanomaterials in large scale and in economic way. Unless we do that, we will not be able to use them for societal application. So today's talk I'll try to cover the synthesis part. What are the various synthesis mechanisms or various synthesis methods, and how we characterize these nanomaterials and their applications. I'll try to cover as large as possible. So first, the making in a large quantity. So we have employed a method called fluidized bed chemical vapor deposition, and at BRC we have developed a facility. We have designed and fabricated a furnace which can produce carbon nanotube almost a kg per day. This is the highest capacity in India at the rate carbon nanotube is produced. And this is a typical transmission electron microscopic image, because in nanometer dimension we cannot see in a naked eye. It will look like powder, but if we put it on the microscope, electron microscope, we can find out their structure. So why it is called nanotube, you can see these are tubular kind of structure with hollow core. So that is why this is a transmission electron microscopy. We can further go, that is called high resolution electron microscopy, where we can see the walls of the carbon. You can measure the number of the walls. So wall to wall distance is in the Armstrong, that is typically 3.4 to 3.5 Armstrong you can find. So this is high resolution high resolution electron microscopy of carbon nanotube. And in this furnace, we can make almost a kg per day, and having a diameter of 15 to 25 nanometer, length in the length of micron, with a purity of 98.5%. Now, how we make? I'll just give a glimpse. So we require a carbon source, definitely, which is hydrocarbon acetylene. We require some support material. In the fluidized bed, some method is called fluidization, which I'll show in the next slide. So some substrate needs to be fluidized, which is carbon black. This is a very cheap material and readily fluidizable. We require a carrier gas. We have used argon as the carrier gas. A catalyst is required. Ferrocene is an organometallic catalyst, which on decomposition gives iron nanoparticle, onto which the carbon nanotube is formed. And we have employed a synthesis temperature of between 700 to 1000 degrees centigrade with atmospheric pressure. And this is the typical furnace, and I'll just show what fluidization means. So like if we pass the gas, these carbon black particles, they will start to circulate in this fashion, and from bottom we will send the ferrocene with the carrier gas, and high temperature they will pyrolyze and give the iron nanoparticle, and then hydrocarbon comes. I'll give the mechanism which we developed, the mechanism which published. What happens in a fluidized bed? There are two phases in a fluidized bed. One phase is called emulsion phase. These black dots, so they are basically carbon black particles. Along with the gas phase, they make a homogeneous phase which is called emulsion phase. They're moving, and there is called a bubble phase. So the excess gas which goes from bottom to top, that is called bubble phase. So from the bubble phase, the hydrocarbon, that is acetylene, travels from bubble phase to emulsion phase, and in emulsion phase it interacts with that carbon black particles. So it tries to diffuse through the carbon black particles, and here the iron nanoparticles are sitting, and this iron nanoparticle, this hydrocarbon comes, they get cracked, and what happens, they have solubility, the carbon is having solubility in the iron nanoparticle, they get soluble, they get saturated, finally supersaturated, and then after supersaturation it comes out as a tubular structure depending on the partial pressure of the supersaturated as well as the composition of the gas. And when carbon nanotube grows, the decomposed hydrogen and the argon, it comes out. So this is the mechanism which is proposed for this kind of synthesis. And also we developed some mathematical models. Why mathematical models required? Unless we develop it, we'll not be able to scale it up, because we need to understand the overall rate of reaction and rate controlling steps. For that, mathematical model is required. I'm not going into the details. So after we obtain the carbon nanotube, we have to see them under electron microscopes, as I told. The first thing is scanning electron microscope, that is SEM. So we can see some kind of fibrate structure. So it may be tubular, it may not be tubular, it may not have whole core. So, but we can understand whether all are tubes or there are some impurities also. So we can see that almost a large portion, maybe more than 95%, is a tubular structure. So after that, we can go for the TM, that is transmission electron microscope, where we can see the detailed structure. So okay, inside is hollow, so we can call it carbon nanotube. We can go for further high resolution, that is called high resolution TM. Here I can count the number of walls also. So there may be 8 to 13 walls, and this is outer diameter, this to this is inner diameter. So inner is hollow, and these are the wall. So we call them multi-wall, because we can count there are more than one wall. So this is multi-wall carbon nanotube. And another typical, so as soon as we get the product, making the sample for the electron microscopy takes some time. But we can use Raman spectroscopy, which is a typical procedure, a typical characterization technique by which we can understand whether it is a multi-wall or single wall. So we can have characteristics D, G, and 2dP for multi-wall carbon nanotube, but for single wall there will be different, that I will show. We also do thermogravimetry to find out how much is the purity. So we oxidize some amount of material in the presence of oxygen or air, and from the wet loss we can calculate the amount of amorphous carbon or other impurity present in it. As I told, we can also make single wall carbon nanotube. So single wall carbon nanotube, you can get only one wall, but they come into bunches. Because of very high surface energy, they will try to make bundle. So we always get them in a bundle form. And if we see the Raman spectra, you can see here the D peak is missing. So D is due to the defect. So generally in single wall, that peak is missing. We get another peak called RBM, the radial breathing mode peak. And from this peak, this is a very characteristic peak for the single wall carbon nanotube. And we can actually calculate the diameter by analyzing this peak. So far I have talked about the fluidized bed technique, where we require some substrate material on which the carbon nanotube grows. There is another technique which is called floating catalyst CVD, by which, that is called floating catalyst chemical vapor deposition. CVD means chemical vapor deposition. We can prepare multi-wall carbon nanotube, single wall carbon nanotube, graphene, as well as CNT aerogel. And this floating catalyst is typically used for CNT aerogel, which I'll show what is CNT aerogel. So this is a typical video. Here you can see how it happens. This is inside furnace, very high temperature, more than 1200 degrees centigrade temperature, and a rod is rotating. That is from the outside we are pushed inside, a rod is rotating. This is the CNT aerosol formation starts. You can see something like agarbatti type of thing is coming, which is in the gas phase. Carbon nanotube is growing, and then we can go on collecting them on the rod. So you can easily find that this is typically the growth of the CNT aerosol. So as I told, in this floating catalyst method, we can produce multi-wall once again. We can produce single wall carbon nanotube, and we can produce that is called carbon nanotube aerosol. Just now I showed the video. So it will come like this, and this has tremendous properties. We can make fiber out of them. We can make sensor out of them. So they are very long carbon nanotubes entangled together. Here you can see them. Also, we can produce graphene, as I told, graphene by the floating catalyst CVD method. So floating catalyst CVD is a versatile method. We can produce various kinds of carbon nanomaterials by changing the processing conditions. Now coming to the applications. As I have told, then we can dope carbon nanotube with heteroatom. Why we are doping? To alter its properties. Like if we dope with nitrogen, we can get the structure will slightly change. It will come like bamboo shaped. So what happens? This is the atomic position of carbon, wherefrom we can knock out one carbon atom and place nitrogen atom. So depending on the placing, it can have pyridinic structure, pyrolytic structure, or graphitic nitrogen structure. And by doping that, what we have seen, we can improve the interaction with the hydrogen. So here I have shown in a graph how with nitrogen doping, the hydrogen adsorption capacity has improved of carbon nanotube. It had a typical application in a nuclear reactor where during accidental condition, there is a release of hydrogen. So we can, how we can characterize nitrogen doping? Apart from the bamboo shape structure, we can do FTIR, that is called Fourier transform infrared spectroscopy, where we get typical bonding of nitrogen with CH3, nitrogen carbon bonding at various positions, from where we can conclude, okay, nitrogen has been doped. We have also tried boron doping. Now, in case of nitrogen, you have seen there are bamboo-like structures, but when we dope boron, the structures are different. You cannot see now that compartment type of structure. Rather, you can get almost hollow, but there will be defects in the wall. So, if we see the hydrogen adsorption properties of boron dope, it is much higher. So, if we see a single wall carbon nanotube and multi-wall carbon nanotube, the hydrogen adsorption in this level, with nitrogen doping, it has improved slightly, but with boron doping, it can really improve very high. Now coming to application in the water purification. So for all this application, we require very high surface area of carbon nanotube, and it absorb the heavy metals or even the fluoride from the water. Here we developed a freestanding structure where the carbon nanotubes, they are in the radial direction of this tubular structure, macro geometry. These are aligned carbon nanotubes. The philosophy is that the water should flow through that and come out from the wall. So during coming out, only water will come out, and the absorbed this heavy metals and the fluorides from the water, they will get absorbed. So this is a typical module, means we can make this kind of geometry and we can fit them under hand pump or other water sources, wherefrom we can get the pure water. Now coming to the separation of rare earths. Rare earths are very important materials, and I must say that today's world is dominated by rare earth. So their rare earth elements are there in our everyday life, like in magnets. So in our computer hard disk, in cell phone, or in if you see the windmills, their rare earth magnets are used. So rare earth is driving our regular day nowadays. So this rare earth, if we can separate them using carbon nanotube and polymer composite beads, where we can really make beads using carbon nanotube and polymer. And this I have seen the structure, internal structure, where you can see the porous structure where the rare earth can be adsorbed. So I have given a typical example of yttrium extraction, where you can see that without nanotube, what is the distribution ratio for yttrium, that has almost improved 6 times when we use carbon nanotube in that. So what is the role of the carbon nanotube? Basically, carbon nanotube, they modify the pore structure as well as they get functionalized and they absorb the rare earth material. So typically, like this carbon nanotube, they get functionalized with the ligands which is specific to the rare earths. And here in the transmission electron microscopy, you can find out these rare earths metals, they are getting deposited on the carbon nanotube. So, and this is specific, means if there is a other metals, the other metals will not come. It is the rare earth which can come. So we can selectively take the rare earths in the carbon nanotube. Similarly in actinide, so here we can functionalize carbon nanotube. It's called amidoamine group. Here this is a typical, theoretical studies were done, and then practically, like in this bottle, this water contains uranium as well as americium, and these functionalized carbon nanotube powders were added, they were shaken, and when you allow them to settle, this water is free from them. So basically, carbon nanotube can be functional with another group called amidoamine, which is specific to the actinides. So by this way, I want to mean this carbon nanotubes can be used for separation of target specific metal ions. This is another interesting study. So as I have told that there is a hollow tube. Carbon nanotube means hollow. So end will be a cap. This is a hollow part. This was, and these are the walls. So whether we can fill the hollow part with some metal, and we can check whether their properties, whether this is changing or not. So here we have filled with bimetallics, samarium and cobalt. And samarium cobalt, they form intermetallics SmCO5, which is hard magnet and very strong magnet. So this can be used now as a nanomagnet. So this has very typical applications. Recently, during COVID time, we have started to see whether there is possibility to use the filter based on carbon nanotube to capture the virus and also to detect them. As you can see, the carbon nanotube, they can have porosity in the range below 100 nanometer. And these viruses, typically this COVID virus, they have in the size of 80 to 120 nanometer. So we have carried out some experiment with called FAS. So FAS is virus to bacteria. So they will not harm a human, but they are bacteria, virus to the bacteria. So we can handle them at our laboratory because we cannot handle the COVID virus here. So there is one virus is called P1 FAS. So we have shown they have a similar size. So this P1 can be easily trapped in the carbon nanotube based filter. And how we can, after trapping, we can really characterize them with Raman spectroscopy. Here I have shown that carbon nanotube will have their signature. This is typical P1 FAS signature. And when it is trapped, we can really find out, okay, whether it is trapped or not. Now I am coming to another structure called graphene. So as I have told, carbon nanotube, we call it one-dimensional structure because the length is too high with respect to the diameter. And the graphene, we call it two-dimensional structure. But really, whether we can use a two-dimensional structure, because a two-dimensional structure we can manufacture, but for application, can we transfer it somewhere? So it is very difficult. Means we can do that, but difficult. So there is another concept has come that is called three-dimensional graphene. So this 2D structure, it will grow in 3 dimensions, but keep its 2D property intact. So here it is called a three-dimensional graphene. I have shown a electron microscopic image where we can have very high porosity. So what is the application? I'll tell at the end. So this 3D dimensional graphene can be developed by a method called low pressure chemical vapor deposition. We can also develop a hybrid structure. It's very interesting. Means once 3-dimensional graphene, on top of that, we can grow carbon nanotubes which are aligned, highly aligned. So aligned carbon nanotubes by plasma enhanced CVD. So it is a hybrid structure. Bottom side is three-dimensional graphene. Top side is aligned carbon nanotube. They have very specific sensing application, and also an supercapacitor. Here I'll show a very beautiful structure. We call it graphene flower. So this is like a rose, but these are all graphene walls, vertically aligned graphene walls. They have been developed in a particular fashion, and this structure has very high surface area, which can be used for supercapacitor application. So with this, now I am coming to the last part of the application, for which I have been conferred Shanti Swarup Bhatnagar Award. So I will just try to cover this briefly. So that is called Bhabha Kavach. So Bhabha Kavach is a lightweight ballistic resistant jacket or bulletproof jacket. So I'll give a concept of a bulletproof jacket. What happens? Basically, there are two parts in a bulletproof jacket. One part is called soft armor panel, which covers our body. It takes the body contour, and this is a flexible part. And then we call some hard armor panel, which is not flexible, but it has some contour, which takes, like, if we can put on our chest or something. So it has some curvature, but once given the shape, it is hard. So this is placed here. A pouch is there inside the pouch. So a combination of soft armor and hard armor gives us the protection. When there is a low caliber bullets, like if we fire from pistol 9mm and from Stain gun, so for that this soft armor panel is sufficient. We don't require hard armor. But if we receive a bullet from AK-47 or SLR, so we require hard armor panel. So there comes the classification of threat level. So first, something is called level 3A, where only from the Stain gun or pistol we can have a fire. Then comes 3, where SLR and AK-47 mild steel core is it can be fired, and then comes level 3 plus, where AK-47 hard steel core bullets are fired, and INSAS. I'm not going into details into that, but what was the objective? Our objective was to develop a lightweight jacket. It should provide a multi-hit capability. Means after one fire, it should not get damaged. So it should have a multi-hit capability, and also it should have a reducing blunt trauma or backface signature. I'd like to explain this part because even the bullet is stopped, the energy, kinetic energy of the bullet, that is converted into some other kind of energy. Mostly we get some protrusion backside. So this protrusion, if it is very big, it can damage our internal organs, and by that even the bullet is stopped, one person can die. So we need to keep that protrusion below a level. So this is called a trauma or backface signature. How we measure? So say typically this is a plasticine kind of material which resembles our body muscle, and on top of that we put our armor panel, and bullet is hit, and then we measure the depth into the plasticine. So this gives an impression into that. So we measure the depth, that is called blunt trauma or backface signature. So this should be below certain value in order to save our soldiers. So the hard armor panel, there are two components what we have used, that hot pressed boron carbide and carbon nanotube composites, and then there are laminar structure of ultra high molecular polyethylene and carbon nanotube. And in Why carbon nanotube and boron carbide composite? So there we have done several studies and we have seen three properties are important. One is hardness. Basically, the hardness of the ceramic part should be harder than the bullet and it should fragment your bullet. It should have a good flexural strength and it should have a good fracture toughness. What is fracture toughness? Fracture toughness means it should be able to absorb the energy. So we have developed a material with carbon nanotube and boron carbide composite, which is hard enough to deform the bullet, which is having good fracture toughness so that it can absorb the energy. It gets fractured itself, but it deforms the bullet. And these all fractured part, they gets absorbed in the backing material. That means I'll show you, this is the backing material. Here, these are the backing material where this fragmented part will be captured. I'll show this is how typically we do. Like first, ultra high molecular polyethylene sheet, we spray carbon nanotube on that. We do compaction molding. Then with ceramic tiles, they are attached to that. Then something is called vacuum bagging. Then rapid aramid wrapping. And then we end up with a hard armor panel. And this hard armor panel and soft armor panel, they undergo rigorous testing. What it does, it undergoes thermal cycling, say minus 40 degree to plus 75, like that temperature cycling it goes, because it has to it has to withstand the harsh environment. Then the soft armor panel, they undergo tumbling. What is done in tumbling? We put in a tumbler with water, it rotates in a certain RPM for 10 days. After that, all these things, they are taken out and then they are shoot by bullet. So they have to withstand the bullet after doing all these rigorous tests. And also drop test is done. Means we drop the material from a height. So it has to withstand all these previous tests and then it has to withstand the fire. So I'm just showing some of the results, how the carbon nanotubes have improved the property. So this is a typically what normally our forces used to use. And if we fire, it has a dent like this much, which measures around 40 to 44 millimeter, which was acceptable, but now it is no. This is the Bhabha Kavach where carbon nanotube is there with boron carbide, hot pressed boron carbide, and see the dent, almost you cannot see that. So very minimum. So these are the bullets struck inside that. Even we can see in the X-ray radiography, the bullets are fragmented and they are captured. So by this way, we have analyzed everything and we have ended up with various kinds of Bhabha Kavach. Like we have a regular design of Bhabha Kavach for CISF and others. We have a 360-degree protection. That means front, back, side. This is for the Northern Command in Jammu Kashmir. We have a special design for CRPF that is called standalone Bhabha Kavach. So this is a consignment photograph I have shown for different elite forces. And this is a photograph where Director BRC is handing over Bhabha Kavach to the Director General of CISF for their use. So Bhabha Kavach also, it has got wide media coverage. And with this, and before I conclude, so I would like to acknowledge the contributions of my team members. I got a wonderful team and they work tirelessly and selflessly. And then I got good mentors. And I also thank my collaborators at BRC and other institute. And with this, I must thank you all for your kind attention. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dasgupta, for the informative and so understandable talk. So this carbon from very beginning, from our secondary school time, we are learning about the allotropes, its natural existence, and it's really so fascinating to see the synthesized form and how it can be used for the societal purpose and other multidisciplinary arenas, like for getting the virus detected. So it's really very impressive and informative. Thank you again.
Thank you.
So we shall move towards our next speaker for the day, who is another Shanti Swarup Bhatnagar Award winner in the same category of engineering science, Dr. Amol Arvind Rao Kulkarni. Sir, are you here? Dr. Amol? Yeah. So I should introduce him first to our viewers and then we will have his talk. So Dr. Amol Arvindarao Kulkarni is a scientist in the Chemical Engineering and Process Development Division at one of our CSIR labs, the National Chemical Laboratory situated in Pune. He is a chemical engineer by training. He did his BE in Chemical Engineering and PhD in Chemical Engineering from Institute of Chemical Technology, Mumbai. He did his postdoctorate at Max Planck Institute, Germany as a Humboldt Fellow in 2004 and was an IUSSTF Research Fellow at MIT, USA in 2010. He works in the area of design and development of continuous flow reactors and exploring their applications for continuous synthesis of pharmaceutical intermediates, dyes, perfumeries, chemicals, and nanomaterials. He has established the first of its kind microreactor laboratory in India. He also works on experimental and numerical analysis of multiphase fluid dynamics in presence of diffusion and reaction. He has been awarded with several awards, which includes Vasvik Award by Vasvik Foundation of Excellence in Industrial Research. He is the recipient of Soina Jayanti Fellowship by the DST Government of India and has received several Young Scientist Awards from Indian National Science Academy, Indian National Academy of Engineering, CSIR, Indian Academy of Sciences, and Organization of Pharmaceutical Producers of India. He is also a selection committee member of the Humboldt Foundation. So he has number of publications, supervised 8 PhD students till now, and few more are ongoing, and has filed over 35 patents. He has also designed several flow reactors that are licensed to Indian industries. So with this, I take the pleasure to welcome Dr. Kulkarni. Many congratulations to you once again. Let me now invite you for your talk on the topic making molecules in flow. Sir, you can please upload your, share your presentation.
Yeah. Is it visible now?
Yeah, it's visible. It's visible and it's audible also.
So, good morning, everybody. First of all, I thank Dr. Shikha and Dr. Geeta Vanirayasan for arranging this good event where we can introduce and we can also listen to all the award winners of this year. First and foremost, I kind of would like to thank my organization, National Chemical Laboratory, who has been supporting for last 15 years to make me move in this particular direction, where we are trying to understand how can we intensify the processes and how can we kind of improve the processes. And a large number of my students who have been helping, working with me for more than almost 15 years now, and things have been moving in the right direction. It all has been possible also because of the funding agencies. So let me kind of give some big background about why I have given this topic. So first and foremost thing, when you say that we are making molecules in flow, what does it mean? It means that we anyway make the molecules. All the chemical synthesis happens in, say, your round bottom flask or in the test tubes or in beakers. And so what is so new in that? The most important thing is that when we say, let's take the case of when we make a cup of tea at home, we basically kind of take some water, we heat it, then we add some tea powder, then we also add some sugar, we also add some milk, we allow it to boil to certain extent, and after that we kind of basically filter it, and then we have our cup of tea ready. Now all what we have done is we have processed a batch. So all the cooking that we also do at home is all batch operation for us chemical engineers. So when I'm saying that making molecules in flow, it means that it's all the reactions are happening, but not in the conventional batch mode, the way we make a cup of tea, but in a continuous mode. So let me kind of take you through this concept, and I will also show some of the experience or the examples from my own lab. So there is a reason why we started moving into this area. And the most important reason is that kind of coming from a CSIR lab where we are supposed to work significantly for the industry and also try to find out the scientifically challenging problems which are relevant to these applications. The first important thing was that when we kind of tried to look into the processes that the Indian industry is kind of adopting to or which they are using. Although this is not the case at this point of time, many things are changing over a period of time for a variety of reasons. But in general, the processes are old in the sense the chemical synthesis routes are very, very old. The conventional routes are used with large amount of solvents which need to be kind of recovered afterwards. And in general, whenever you to recover the solvent, there are losses of solvent also. Then there is a significant downstream processing is required, which is purification. And since if the downstream processing cost is more, then basically it keeps you out of competition as compared to the global manufacturers. Third point was that when it produces large quantities of waste because the old processes were primarily kind of developed to synthesize something without worrying too much about what all else is getting produced. So the overall amount of desired product is typically much less as compared to what all is getting produced. So you have to in kind of where that is where all the purification processes come. And so your lot of money goes even in kind of purifying the products. Then the operations are typically based on the toxic materials. A huge inventory is kept so that you kind of make sure that your batches go one after the other, and that all these things basically make the process also unsafe. So in general, on the right hand side, if you see that these are the variety of fine and specialty chemicals that we use on our day-to-day life, and if you categorize them in different segments, the Indian market, the market share of the Indian companies or Indian manufacturing industries in specific domains is not very significant when you look at the world market. If pharma is 2.3, it might have gone to 2.4, 2.5 at the most. Dyes is 7.6, paints is 6. So we are making probably very small, while our volumes are large, we are not making that big impact. But the growth rates are double, and so there is a possibility to double the market share in next 5 years or so. So what are the solutions? How do we make it happen? The first and foremost thing is to revisit the chemistry. Because many times, as I said before, the chemical routes are developed kind of several decades ago. Many of the routes are developed during the Second World War, and so our industries are still following them. Second solution is to re-engineer the processes. So you basically make them fast, make them continuous. Third is cross the barrier of scale, time, operating conditions. Basically you kind of club the chemistry with the right engineering approach to make a process better. And finally, to eliminate or reduce the need for downstream processing, which basically what it means is that you reduce the amount of solvent that you are using. You also make sure that your process gives you the required product more in quantity as compared to all the other waste that it's producing. And so that basically makes sure that you are eliminating or reducing the downstream processing from your process. So keeping these parts in mind, we started working on this continuous flow synthesis. Now, why continuous? Now, all of us, when we want to travel in large cities or big cities, we don't want to have signals on the way. We don't want to have speed breakers. We want to basically don't want to take a break anywhere because of traffic. What we want is that from one location to the other location, we must move seamlessly without any gaps or without any stops. Our digestive systems also works in a manner that although we eat only kind of a couple of times, it's in operation continuously. During the daytime, the photosynthesis is continuous. Fortunately, our heart as well as kidney, they work in continuous mode. Now this all is, we feel better because it is all continuous. And why it is better? Because it's all very, very efficient. So in general, continuous processes are supposed to be inherently efficient. And that's why one has to move into continuous processing. But it is not very new to us. If you look at the below photographs here, most of the biscuits that we eat or the cookies that we buy from the market, they all are manufactured in continuous mode. In large corporate organizations, during their lunch time, all the chapatis are made in continuous mode. You get kind of all the chocolates are manufactured in continuous mode. Your car assembly lines runs in continuous mode. Your tablets, capsules are made in continuous mode. So there are multiple examples because it makes you not only get the speed, but it also delivers you what you want at the right time. So what it means is that when all these kind of simple examples are around, then why not to also start making chemicals continuous? But making chemicals continuous is also not that old, not that new. Uh, Now, before I take you to that timeline, let me just show you when I say continuous, when specifically for carrying out reactions, what do I mean? Let me revisit this kind of earlier example of making cup of tea. Now, when we make a cup of tea, as I had explained you the procedure or the protocol that we follow every day. And what it has, we typically have a fixed volume of our reactor. So that vessel or utensil that we use in which we add some water, it has a fixed volume. What varies is time, and over a period of time, kind of the reactions happen, the temperature changes because we are heating heating water, then we are also adding some milk. So what is happening is that you are trying to control the heat or you're doing the heat management over a period of time to get the required product. Now this is exactly what is the batch protocol is. So you have set times for addition of your reactants. You have set time for addition of your any solvents or any other additives. You have set time for stopping the heating. You have set time for uh, starting the stirring or stopping the stirring. You have set time for cooling the batch and set time for kind of using or kind of recovering the product from that. Now what happens here is that when you do this, kind of I can bet on this that when you make a cup of tea every day the taste would be slightly different. And that is the typical problem of batch. A batch protocol, however optimized you do the optimization, there will always be a slight variation in terms of the product quality. There is another option called semi-batch where you cannot add all the reactants simultaneously, where you have to add one of the reactants slowly and steadily over a period of time, while the second reactant is already there in the batch reactor. Now, this operation is very common in most of the pharmaceutical, agrochemical, and the dyes industry, because what you are doing is that whenever the reaction takes place, some amount of heat gets generated if the reaction is exothermic. It means that basically during the reaction heat gets produced and so temperature rises. Now if you add all the reactants together, then the rise in the heat will be proportional to the total reaction that happens and the total amount of fluid which is reacting, because it happens in terms of the moles of the fluids which are reacting. So since it is always not possible to remove all the heat in one go, it is necessary to control that rise in the temperature, and so one has to go for a semi-batch mode where you are adding one of the reactants slowly over a period of time, making sure that the temperature in the reactor does not rise significantly. And so then comes the continuous, where the time is invariable. In the sense, irrespective of when you take a sample from the reactor, you continuously the reactants are coming in, product is going out. And so whenever you take a sample from the reactor, it's always should be having a consistent quality. Most of the times, kind of your product quality depends on the operating conditions, that is your flow rate and the volume of the reactor, which decides how much time it is going to spend in the reactor. And there are different types of such reactors, and there are different like the continuous third tank reactor and the plug flow reactors, and there are various modes in which they are operated also. Now, by and large, why industries use batch operation? Now, first is ease of implementation, because what you do in the lab, because for decades, many of you would have done the laboratory experience in your undergrad as well as in your 10th, 12th standard. You always use something like a test tube or round bottom flask or a beaker. So it becomes ease of implementation. You can imagine what is small scale, what is large scale. It gives you flexibility in using the equipment for variety of products. Like say when we do cooking at home, we use the same utensil for making variety of recipes. So it gives you flexibility. There is the ease of operation, because our mindset has always been working in the batch mode. So we always feel like, okay, it's easy to operate a batch reactor. And most important thing, since industries are running the batch operations for several decades, the investments are already made. So why you should make a new investment? So there has to be a compelling reason why it has to happen. And if you see the below schematic, as your scale increases, your risk also increases. Risk in terms of couple of factors. First is safety. Second is the product quality. It means that as you are increasing the size, you are likely to also, you have to absorb the risk of always making small variation in the product quality also at that scale. So sometimes the batches do fail, where your product is not of use also. So why get away from the batch or semi-batch operations? The first and foremost thing, I would not recommend that every batch operation needs to be made continuous. There has to be a compelling reason. reason for that, and quantitative data should prove the need for change. So very short payback periods on new investments are possible, which is typically not possible from the batch. While the continuous mode of operation allows you to get very short payback periods, that whatever that you invest, probably you will recover all the money in few months' time. Then you don't need to use imported reactors for such cases. Everything can be made here in India. One can make more from the same space. In the sense, I will come to that point. Now, because you are operating your reactors at very different conditions, the amount of space required for these reactions is very, very small. So you can use your existing plant space for multiple products. So chemical plants with reduced pollution and better selectivity of the required product. And so continuous manufacturing is the future of chemical manufacturing. And it is already on the way, and you will see it happening in the very recent time that is going to come. Now let me go through the basics of what is flow chemistry, because when we make a molecule, there is another terminology which you see is flow chemistry. So it means a chemical reaction is run in a continuously flowing stream rather than in the batch production. So what it means is that the reactants, when they come together and as they are flowing together, they will react. So pumps are required for flowing such fluids. If you have gases, then there are different ways of kind of pumping gases. You need high pressure cylinders for that, and also mass flow controllers for that. But more importantly, when these pumps or these fluids, either gas liquid or liquid liquid reactants, when they flow together, it is not that they will ask that, okay, in which type of reactor I am flowing, and then only I will start reacting. No, what matters is the condition at which they are coming together. So if these fluids are reactive, the reaction takes place. And so you also need a right temperature for that. So flow synthesis is well-established technique for use of large-scale manufacturing, large quantities of bulk chemicals. When I say bulk chemicals, petrochemicals, fertilizers, solvents, very large quantity acids, all have been manufactured in continuous mode for more than 7 decades. However, it is relatively new to use it in the laboratory environment for complex reactions. And I will show you some of those reactions or some of those products as we move along in this presentation. So when I say continuous flow reactors, you need really small reactors for that. Typically, I have just shown a schematic on the left-hand side to show some dimensions. And on the right-hand side, I have shown some photographs of few reactors where you can see the relative size of a reactor plate when through the reactants flow and the reaction happens. That 1 rupee coin will tell you about the size of the reactor. I will come to a little different sizes after some couple of slides. But what is important here is that your reactants flow through a very small channel, whether it's a single homogeneous phase reaction or it is a two-phase reaction. And because of the small channel sizes, the diffusion happens at very fast, and so your mixing happens very fast, and so the reaction happens. The reaction also becomes faster. Second important thing is that the smaller the channel size or the reactor size, you are having very large, basically, surface area for heat transfer. Now, what I mean by this? So let me come to this point. So when see, every chemistry is different, and it needs individual attention because the reactants as well as the products have different physical properties. The reaction also has different rates of reaction. So in general, with increase in 10 degrees centigrade of the reaction temperature, the reaction rate doubles. Now, it depends on the exact value of the kinetics, but that is a thumb rule. So what it means is that if you want to increase the rate of your reaction, which you are typically doing at say minus 40 degrees centigrade, then let's assume that you are doing the reaction at minus 40 degrees centigrade for 8 hours. And so if you do the same reaction at minus 30, you will do it in 4 hours. If you do the same reaction, it is 10 plus 10 degrees, it is 15 minutes. If you go to 20 degrees centigrade, it is like kind of almost 7.75 minutes. And if you go to kind of room temperature, that is around 30 degrees centigrade, it is of the order of around 3.5 or 4 minutes. Now you can imagine that a reaction which was happening for 8 hours at minus 40 degrees centigrade can also happen in few minutes at a room temperature. Now, yes, it is very much possible to do. But what happens is that when a reaction is exothermic, it means that it's going to release the heat. Your generation of heat depends on the rate at which the reaction is happening, and also it depends on the amount of reactant which is reacting. So if you mix all the reactant together at the same time, it's going to generate a lot of heat. So by doing the reaction at -40, you're actually slowing down the reaction kinetics, the reaction rate. And so you're not allowing the reaction to move very fast. But over that 8 hours of period, the amount of heat generated is same as the total amount of heat that will get generated if you do the same reaction in 3 or 4 minutes at room temperature. So what it means, if you have to carry out that reaction in 3 to 4 minutes, you also should have an ability to remove that much heat in 3 to 4 minutes time. So now this is very, very important. So on one side, it allows you to kind of go to really kind of rapid reaction. On the other hand, it does not allow you to, it does not make it easy for you to conduct that reaction so fast, because heat, you cannot remove that much heat. And the only way to remove that much heat is by increasing the heat transfer area. So basically, when you say, for example, when you are making a cup of tea, you are giving the heat from the bottom. When you are doing a reaction in the, I have shown these 3 reactors here. When you are doing the reaction in a such kind of a glass reactor, your heat transfer is happening from the sides of the reactor or the reactor wall. So now there is a principle that if you have, say let's assume that we have a reactor or which is 1 meter cube in volume. So now for the same constant volume, if I have to make multiple reactors of smaller diameter, let's see what happens. If I use a reactor which is, say, for example, 1 meter diameter, then in that case my overall area per unit volume, that is surface area of the reactor per unit volume, is 4 meters square per meter cube. If I reduce the diameter of the reactor and increase its length by, say, reduce the diameter by 2 times, then automatically my length will increase and my heat transfer area will increase. So if I continue to do this, then over a period of kind of along the sequence, if I go to 1 millimeter tube size, because I can't have a reactor which is stirring at having a diameter of 1 millimeter, it's a tube. So if I use a 1 millimeter diameter tube, then what I have is a heat transfer area which is 4,000 meters square per meter cube. Now, what it means is that the ability to remove the heat has improved by 1,000 times as I'm going down. So now this is the kind of the most important advantage of going for small reactors, micro reactors, or making the synthesis in continuous flow. Now we have been doing this in my lab for last few years. The advantages it gives are like it gives consistent product quality, because continuously your reactants are going in, spending a fixed amount of time at a fixed condition, and so whatever that comes out has to be of the always of the consistent quality. Then there is this continuous supply of the product that also happens. You don't need to take a break. Your system can run 24/7 even in your absence. So it also gives you compact production plants, which are small in typically very small, as because every unit operation becomes smaller. So the entire chemical plant footprint becomes really very, very less. So if you are operating the conventional batch reactors, so as compared to that, the continuous manufacturing plants of the same capacity will be a kind of at least 25% of the existing plant size. So it means that you can use that remaining 75% space for producing some other chemicals. So small amount of chemicals inside the reactor, because as I have told you, if you are going to 3-minute reaction time, it means that my reactor size also has gone down significantly. So at any point of time, at the reaction condition, very small amount of chemicals exist there. So it makes it inherently safer. At the same time, you are saving a lot on utility, in the sense heating or cooling is happening in a very different manner as compared to what you are doing at -40 degrees centigrade. You are able to do the reaction very rapidly, and so since your entire plant size has gone down, you don't need to kind of have one single very large plant, but you can have multiple small plants, and so your manufacturing becomes distributed. And so you can produce depending on where you want to make and where you want to supply the product. So the typical setups for such cases are very simple. What you need are basically the 2 storage vessels through which the reactants flow. Then there is a mixer or a micro mixer, followed by a residence time unit, which is typically a tubular reactor, a tube or a coil, through which the reactants flow. They react this can be immersed inside a constant temperature bath or in a ultrasound bath, depending on what kind of reaction you are doing, and then collect the product at the outlet. Now, if you have a second reaction to be carried out, because this product is not very stable, it has to be immediately consumed with the next reactant. That outlet can again mix with a second reactant, and you can continue to do this entire sequence of operations endlessly till you get the required product. You might also need to kind of have or develop one or two additional continuous separation protocols, which will make sure that if there is a need of separation, you are able to separate the products and taking the desired product for the next reaction as a reactant. So the system becomes really simple in terms of assembly, and you can practically kind of even make multiple library of molecules just by switching one of the reactants in time. So at NCL, we have been kind of working on it, and we have developed specific approach for it. So we identify the reaction first, we study its kinetics, then we develop the reaction engineering models, which are kind of, it's a conventional classic reaction engineering. Then we basically come out with the devices that are required for carrying out this reaction. We study the fluid flow, fluid dynamics in those devices and the reactors. And finally, we basically check the proof of the concept and go for the scale up of those things. So now onwards, I will kind of show you a few case studies and that we have worked on in last few years. The first one, I will come in the next slide. We also do one more thing. See, whenever a typical chemistry student or a chemist wants to look at the reaction, he likes to classify the reaction. And the classification of reaction happens typically based on the functional groups or the named reaction, or basically the stability of the what groups are associated on the aromatic ring and so on. Now for chemical engineers, the classification has to be of little different kind. While the previous classification exists, the classification has to be done in terms of whether the reaction is highly exothermic, whether it is a shock sensitive reaction. That, say for example, if you are doing a reaction involving diazonium salts or involving nitroglycerin, the small shocks in the reaction can basically make very serious safety issues. Or whether it's a reaction which is single phase or a multi-phase reaction, whether it has series parallel network of reaction. I will show you one example in the next slide, where it's possible to make multiple products and more than what you want. Then are there reactions which are almost instantaneous, which happen in milliseconds? Are there reactions which are selectivity sensitive, where for example sequential reactions are possible? Is the product very toxic? Is it possible that your reactant can get decomposed inside the reactor when it comes in contact with another reactant or at the reaction conditions? Are there any unstable intermediates getting developed in the reaction? Are all the products stable, or do you need to stabilize them? Because these are all the issues which are typically faced in the batch. Once a batch reaction starts, you can't do when the batch actually is in operation, and so on and so forth. So what we do is that whenever we look at any chemistry, before we make it continuous, we run it through this kind of a matrix in a more quantitative manner, and then we take it to the next level of doing the reaction. So far we have done variety of types of reactions and kind of involving multiple steps also. An objective has always been to see whether those can be taken to the manufacturing stage. Let me take the first example. It's a salicylic acid nitration. This is aimed at basically making a drug called mesalazine. There is another route also that goes through diazotization reaction, but here I will go through the nitration. So if you take salicylic acid and do the nitration, it basically gives you three products, of which two are isomers, nitroisomers and nitro derivatives, and one is a phenol. And the reactions are exothermic. So during the reaction, since typically you have to take excess nitric acid, that excess nitric acid also reacts with these products to give the secondary nitro compounds. And all those secondary nitro compounds can further react with the nitric acid to give you the tertiary nitro compound, which is unstable. So what it means is that somewhere you have to stop this reaction in between to make sure that you are not able to go to the last, you should not go to the last end. So we took this case this was the first example that we started working with in 2006. And I always like to show this slide because this is where we started understanding more about continuous flow synthesis. So this is a consecutive reaction. You can see this is a network of reactions. If you don't stop the reaction somewhere, it yields byproducts. It's sensitive to temperature and composition. You need a very precise temperature control, because if you don't do that, then your further reactions are always possible in parallel and in series also. Now, most importantly, the required product, the 5-nitrosalicylic acid, that needs to be hydrogenated further to get the required mesalazine drug. It's a simple two-step reaction. So the conventional batch operation happens in the lab for 30 minutes at 20 degrees centigrade. 100% conversion, you get two side products. In general, multiple fine dinitro products also exist. When you do the large scale operation, the number of side products increase significantly. There was a patent by Lonza around similar time, where they showed that this reaction can be carried out in 10 to 20 seconds at around 50 degrees centigrade you get less conversion, but you make really a lot of byproducts. So we optimize that. This is a simple setup that we use. We nitrating agent we passed from one end, the organic substrate in a solvent we passed from the another end. We allowed it to mix and react and spend some time in the tubular reactor and collect the product at the outlet. And we quenched it in chilled water. So we carried out this optimize this reaction at for 60-second residence time. It's 1 minute, taking place at 80 degrees centigrade, 100% conversion and only 2 products. So we could make sure that no further reactions happen because the residence time was given in such a manner that the reactants produce only the first nitro compounds. Beyond that, they should not produce. By the time they come out, they should get quenched. So we carried out multiple such reactions over a period of time. I will show you a second very recent example where we have developed a process for azelaic acid. Every cream that we apply on our body has azelaic acid in it, including many cosmetics, including lipsticks, and it plays a very important role on basically making sure that our skin does not get damaged because of any kind of fungal infections and so on. Now, as of now, India imports this particular product completely, and there are multiple routes of making this. You can see on the right hand side, you can see the primary manufacturers of this. Many of them come from China. One is from USA, but at this point of time, it has stopped manufacturing because it's not able to compete with the Chinese companies. So we took this case because we felt like we need to have a import substituted process, and so the starting material is very simple. You have oleic acid, which we react with ozone and suitable solvents. We carry out this reaction, and secondary oxidation happens, and then basically we carry out this reaction continuous mode. So on the left hand side, if you see the typical batch operation, even if you go by ozonolysis, it happens at minus 78 degrees centigrades for almost 24 hours. We transform this process in continuous mode. Our reaction happens kind of even close to 0 degrees centigrades in less than 10 seconds in reality. We use the solvent, and basically the reaction happens, the excess ozone as well as the oxygen goes out. The product that we collect is fed for continuous separation, where the excess ozone is taken care, it's basically destructed, and we operate the lab scale synthesis system for very long time. We could kind of in that much short time, we could get 99.8% conversion of oleic acid. We produce 99.5% pure azelaic acid. The byproduct which is also cleavage of the oleic acid, comes from cleavage of oleic acid, is also 99%. Recently, we have put up a pilot plant for that, and it is in operation. So it is the total time required for moving from developing the continuous protocol was almost a month, and taking it from lab to the pilot scale and operating and finalizing the pilot scale also took a couple of months. So in a few months time, you were able to kind of transform the protocol completely. Another very important sector where we are going to focus is diazonium salts, or dyes, agrochemicals and APIs which involve diazonium salts. Now we all like colors of variety of kinds, and in our fabrics, in our the walls and the paint, in our houses, then we also like to have we want to see a beautiful colorful world, and all these colors they come from these dyes and colorants and paints. There are more than 10,000 dyes. Their production is more than kind of almost 700,000 metric tons globally. It is an upcoming market. There are a variety of photochromic dyes are there, thermochromic dyes are there, and this particular area will continue to kind of grow in the coming time. Primarily, it is important for the Asia Pacific region and also for India because our population is large. So we cannot afford to have dyes sector getting or dyes becoming expensive. So dyes have to become cheaper. So, but why dyes? Dyes sector? Primarily because it generates large quantities of effluent, 50 to 700 liters of effluent per kg of the dye. It needs very large amounts of utilities, in the sense typically the diazonium salts which get generated are unstable at high temperature. So you have to keep them, you carry out the entire reaction at very low temperatures. In general, depending on the type of dye that you are producing, the final product yields, they are anywhere from 16% to 90%. And there are inherent impurities in that, and those impurities cannot be separated in several cases, and they change the color of the required product. But since every color has a price, the dye gets sold in the market. But you don't get the required price for that. and you also generate a lot of pollution from this. Typically, the batch sizes are from 10 to 100 meter cube, and to be very frank, a few lakh families directly depend on the dyestuff industry. And at this point of time, since it's a polluting industry, they have to be really very careful in optimizing their protocols, because if they don't do that, all these families will get affected directly. But it also affects the environment significantly. And we also want all the colors. So the solution is to basically re-engineer the process. You also kind of relook at the chemistry, and one of the ways is by converting it to a continuous process. So we started working on this diazonium salt and diazotization processes few years ago. There is a simple method when you make it continuous. You have one stream of your solution comes from one pump, which is basically an aniline along with hydrochloric acid and a buffer if required. And the second is aqueous solution of sodium nitrate. It mixed together in a simple micro mixer, which is kept at low temperature, typically below 5 degrees centigrade. It spends certain time, the diazonium salt comes out. This is the diazonium salt structure, and this needs to be instantaneously coupled with a coupling agent, and so that reaction happens and you collect the product. Now typically the continuous protocols even in the tubular reactors are not suitable, because the diazonium salts are basically suspended particles, so they have to be always carried forward in a very at high superficial velocity, and that design is very crucial. So we transform that into continuous mode. So this is a typical setup for that. Both the reactants enter the reactor, which I have shown here. The reactants enter, diazonium salt gets generated. This salt is fed at the bottom of the second reactor, where your coupling agent also, chilled coupling agent also enters here, which is always kept below 5 degrees centigrade. And then the reaction happens, the product gets synthesized, and you collect it in a filter. So I could have played a video for this, but we don't have much time. But so it is possible to kind of transform the synthesis of dyes in a continuous mode. We have also transformed this in simple screw reactors, where instead of all these things, you basically kind of make a coupling solution, and you also pass all the reactants to a screw reactor, because you are having particles, so the screw can push the particles, and in 1 hour's time you can make almost 1 kg dye in the lab itself. So by doing this, we have made a variety of dyes in the lab. More importantly, we have been able to kind of push the slurry concentration from 1% to 5%. And now what it means, we are able to reduce the water quantity significantly. The theoretical water quantity, if it is 100 say for example 100 ml per gram, and the most optimized process as of now known uses around 30 ml water per gram, we have been able to take it to a close to 16 ml per gram. So you can imagine that from 100 ml per gram that industry uses, we are able to go to 16 ml. So which will basically save a significant amount of water in the industry, and so it will be in a very safe manner. So because it's entirely continuous, so you don't need to use anything excess. I'll come to a couple of quick examples. Another such example is making herbicides, pendimethalin. It was a CSIR sponsored project. So in general, this is one of the large volume herbicides used in India and also exported in good quantities. For manufacturing the required quantity of the pendimethalin in India, the volume processed is like 24,000 meter cube every year. It produces also a large amount of effluent. The conventional process happens at 20 to 40 degrees centigrade for 8 to 16 hours and uses mixed acid. We transform this into an intensified process where our reaction happens much above 50 degrees centigrade. Reaction time is kind of less than 5 minutes, and your 100% conversion and the 97% yield of the desired product. While doing this, we have reduced the solvent quantity also by 40 to 75% depending on the quality of material that we produce, and we use only nitric acid as a nitrating agent, so no sulfuric acid. So your effluent problems reduce significantly. So we have demonstrated it at the lab scale, as I showed earlier. We do the initial lab scale synthesis as proof of the concept, then transform it in a pilot plant with this kind of a pinch tube reactor, and then kind of produce several tens of kilograms of the material from this particular pilot plant. I will show you a few important multi-step flow synthesis here. Now this is all in collaboration with several chemists in NCL, where this first case is of making a drug called ivacaftor. It's the world's most expensive drug, where the treatment cost is per patient per year is $300,000. Now this is a scheme which Dr. D.S. Reddy from NCL had developed this, the synthesis scheme. So we transform it in continuous mode in collaboration with him. The first step is ozonolysis, where we do the ozonolysis at minus 10 degrees centigrade in 1 second, in place of minus 78 degrees centigrade for several hours. Then we basically kind of separate the gas and liquid and subsequently carry out the next 3 steps of reaction. And you can see that we are able to make the product in pure form. So now, as compared to the typical conventional reaction time, which takes few days to go from the left side to the right hand side, you can now see that we are able to precisely make the entire reaction happen in 3 hours, 7 minutes and 1 second. So which is not possible in the conventional mode. Second such example is come from perfumery chemicals, perfumery aldehydes. So there are several of the deos that we use, deodorants that we use has perfumery aldehydes in that. So they are manufactured by controlled oxidation of alcohols to aldehydes, where we have used it's a catalytic reaction. We have again transformed that reaction in continuous mode, checked for variety of substrates and made not only the linear aldehyde but also the aromatic aldehyde and aliphatic and aromatic also in good yield and really small reaction times. So the process of making something in continuous works also for dyes, agrochemicals, perfumery compounds, and also here for some of the bulk chemicals, where we also made one of the case studies was isopropyl alphenol, where we did the first step of nitration of cumin at 10 degrees centigrade using fuming nitric acid. Then after the reaction is complete, we separated the phases. The nitrocumin was subjected to reduction, hydrogenation. Then again, after the hydrogenation is over, it goes to the next step of diazotization, which is at 5 degrees centigrade. And then finally, the hydrolysis happens along with HCl at high temperature inside a microwave. So you can look at the range of conditions which we have done from left hand side to the right hand side and look at the total time that the typical conventional synthesis at the lab scale needs 21 hours. We have reduced it end to end to 20 minutes. So this saves a lot of time. It also gives you a lot of flexibility that you can change the starting materials, you can change any of the intermediate substrate, you can make library of the molecules. So making a chemistry flow saves a lot of time, also makes you more creative. While doing this, we faced one important challenge that most of the chemical reactors which were available at that point of time in 2007, when we started the 5, 6, 7, around that time when we started work, they all were coming from the European industries, extremely expensive. That the cost of the reactor, which was of the size of a matchbox, at that cost we could have purchased a good car in India. So it was really a kind of criminal to keep on buying those kind of reactors. So it was necessary for us to identify the right manufacturing partners. So over a period of time, we identified, we have licensed several designs to 2 companies. That's primarily to Amol Equipments Private Limited from Mumbai, who has sold more than 100 reactors so far, which are in use in the industry of variety of sizes that you can see here, right from 1 milliliter to as much as 165 liters. And the glass line flow reactors to JMM Fowler, again from Mumbai, where the manufacturing happens at Karamsad and Hyderabad recently. So the purpose was to make the reactors affordable and so that the industry can start using it. We have also used this last case study I'll show you. So while we have made variety of chemicals, organic compounds in our group, we also collaborated extensively with the physical chemists and the catalyst synthesis groups in NCL to make variety of nanoparticles. And one of the emphasis that I want to give here is on silver nanowires. So most of the iPhones, all the iPhones have touchscreens made of silver nanowires. Most of the touchscreens that will come out in the near time, including the flexible electronics, will have silver nanowires as an important component of that. In India, we don't make it. We just import the phones. We import the components and assemble them here. We never manufacture any of those components here. Now the time will change very soon. So we decided to start working on this case, and at NCL we developed a continuous process for silver nanowires, and we worked on it for almost close to 2 years. Very challenging thing, because the controlling the growth of nanoparticles in one direction and making the nuclei of specific size in large quantities was really a challenge. For 2 of the students that you see here, they seamlessly worked and transformed the batch protocol into continuous and took the lab scale continuous protocol into a pilot plant where we can make 500 grams of this material per day. When I say 500 grams per day, if you look at the right hand side cost of this material, it weighs from 200 to 600 dollars per gram. So when we make 500 grams, you can calculate and find out what is the worth of that product at this point of time. So the technology is available for licensing, and we look forward that somebody will manufacture it in India. Where they are used, it all goes in making conducting inks, flexible electronics. It also goes in making you print the circuits on a paper, on plastic, on fabric, and make that material conducting, so that you can look for variety of applications. I don't have much of the time, so because although I have many case studies I can show, but let me take you to the last slide. So the future of chemical manufacturing in India is all going to be primarily for fine and specialty chemicals. It's all going to be continuous manufacturing. So continuous flow manufacturing is the future, not only just in India, everywhere, and at every scale, and also for almost every fine and specialty chemical. So the Indian industry has to get geared for this change. Not only Indian industry, also the students, they also have to kind of start thinking, and also the chemistry students also have to start thinking that they need to have this new skill of knowing the flow chemistry. The new approaches need to be explored for individual reaction classes, because there is nothing like a single reactor works for all. It doesn't work. Every chemistry is different, so you need to have the reactors also have to be different. There is an increasing trend of making hazardous chemicals in India. It has been there for quite some time, but we do it because those reactions are banned in Japan and also in Europe as well as in US. China also is slowly banning some of those, but we are still continuing. So although we need to make it, we need to make it more in a safer manner using continuous protocols. So by and large, I have seen that it is a teamwork between the chemists and engineers, and all must have to work synchronously to transform the laboratory scale process or synthesis into a commercially viable process. Thank you very much for listening to me. And I thank CSIR, National Chemical Laboratory, for support right from the beginning. I thank our earlier director, Dr. Shivram, who gave kind of a strong support to start a consortium microreactors along with Dr. Vivek Ranade at that point of time. I also acknowledge the funding from DST through variety of projects on working on various fluid dynamics related components of the development of flow reactors, and the industry consortium, where we had several members over a period of time. More than 30 industries have supported our work. I thank all the collaborators from NCL as well as outside NCL and the group that I have. Thank you very much. I will be happy to take your questions.
Thank you, Dr. Kulkarni. It was really very fascinating to see the chemical manufacturing involved in our day-to-day used items like cosmetics and those paints and all, and how complex it is to manufacture and get the idea. You have used a very simple example of making a tea, but definitely seeing the presentation, it doesn't look like making a tea, a cup of tea. It's really very complex. So let us see if we have some questions. Yeah, we do have questions. So this is for Dr. Dasgupta. Question is this CNT erosion also emits smoke and ash of something? Asked by Gaurav Garg. So, sir, can we have some comments?
Can you repeat?
Yeah. Is the CNT erosion also emit smoke and ash of something?
Also?
Emit
smoke
and ash of any kind.
CNT erosion.
Yeah, so CNT erosion.
Basically, CNT is a nanoparticle. So there will be generation of nanoparticle. Definitely, if it erodes, erode means if we are making some composite material, and due to friction, there is some erosion, or say during handling of the powder, if we don't take care properly, there will be nanoparticle present. So I personally feel that we need to take protection while handling nanoparticle. So we should have proper PPE. That means we should have a mask. When we work, we use N95 always during CNT synthesis in large scale. We should have proper ventilation, and during handling we should wear the gloves and wear the goggles. So this is the basic protection level should be taken while handling nanopowder. But if you are careful, it is not very difficult to handle.
Okay. So is it good at low temperatures? Again, from Gaurav Garg himself.
Low temperatures.
Low temperatures.
Low. See, the definition of low and high is relative. So CNT, yes, it can be used from very low temperature, maybe liquid helium temperature, to till
So
2000 degrees centigrade with an inert atmosphere, because at high temperature it can get oxidized. Is my voice clear, or is it
this
okay?
voice is very clear. This question refers to the Bhava Kavach. Bhava Kavach, it is good. Is it good at low temperatures? This is what he is asked.
It has been tested as low as minus 40 degrees centigrade. So because see, finally in Siachen and in those places the temperature goes very low. So while testing, we do all this thermal cycling. So it has been done till minus 40 degree to plus even 75 degree it has gone. So that much harsh environment it can withstand.
Okay, so we have another question from Mahendra Doke. He asks whether your research about CNT can be useful to develop a jacket or shirt for farmers to mitigate excessive sunlight or heat stroke problems. So any comment on this?
Yeah, definitely we can look at that. So first of all, for making the shirts or this thing, we require CNT in the fiber form, which we are working on. So powder, see, like in Bhava Kavach, in other cases, what happens, we mix the powder with the polymer, then we make the fiber. But CNT in the pure fiber form will be very much useful for the kind of application he is talking about. And we are working in that direction. Once we are able to make long continuous fiber out of CNT, which is called CNT fiber, then definitely I feel it will be able, because it is a very highly conducting to heat. So it can dissipate the heat.
Okay, so I don't think we have any further question. So, yeah, thank you so much. Dr. Amol Kulkarni, I would like to ask this entire setup of your production and development is set up in NCL itself, or you collaborate with industry, or you do this production work with other organizations as well?
No, so we develop all the setups ourselves at NCL. So up to a pilot scale.
Okay.
But when it has to be taken to the commercial scale, then obviously this happens in the industry side.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So all the pilot plant photographs I have shown you are from within NCL.
Within NCL.
Yes.
That's great. That's great. Thank you. So I think we have come to an end of the session. So thank you so much, Dr. Amol Kulkarni and Dr. Kinshuk Dasgupta, for joining with us today and for your wonderful talks. All those who are connected will definitely agree that both the talks were very informative, exciting, and encouraging. Thank you again, both of you. It was very unfortunate not to have Dr. Shikhar Mande, our DG, here today, but we expect him for the next time. I take the opportunity to thank Dr. Geeta Vani, head of our Science Communication and Dissemination Directorate, and Dr. G. Mahesh, our senior principal scientist in the same division, the entire team member, especially Mr. Deepak Jain, our technical officer, for helping and making this program a success. Finally, our viewers, thanking you for joining with us and interacting with the speakers. Stay connected with us in our upcoming episodes on Exploring Science with Shanti Swarup Bhatnagar Prize Winners 2020 next week. Till then, stay happy, stay safe, keep exploring science, and namaskar.